warn you, the video in this next story might be disturbing to some. A chilling PSA on school shootings is creating a much-needed dialogue.
This year, my mom got me the perfect bag for back to school.
These colorful binders help me stay organized.
These headphones are just what I need for studying.
These new sneakers are just what I need for the new year.
This jacket is a real must-have.
My parents got me the skateboard I wanted. It's pretty cool.
And it continues on there. So here to join the conversation that started last week is clinical psychologist Dr. John Duffy. We got Chicago Tribune columnist Heidi Stevens and principal at Gary Comer College Prep, Kelly Dean. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us. Kelly, let's start with you. Obviously a hard video to watch, but as a parent and as a principal, what was your initial reaction?
I have two different reactions. As a parent, it scares me because I have elementary school students and I have a high school student, and the idea that we have to prepare kids to be scared. Like my daughter's school had a lockdown drill last week, and that conversation with my 6-year-old makes me nervous. As a principal, though, I want everybody in the building to know what to do in the case of an emergency, and so there's this confliction between not wanting to experience it and not wanting to have that conversation with my kids, and wanting everybody in the building to know what to do in the event that something happens.
The PSA went on and it got quite a bit more graphic, which is why we stopped it there. Let me ask both of you, John, you could start first. Who is this actually reaching and what is it supposed to do? Because all those of us parents who are watching it, that already scares us anyway.
Yeah.
So that just kind of embraces our fear.
I think it's supposed to do more of that, to be honest. I mean, I think the idea is to provoke us into action, you know, and I think that's a really, really difficult thing to do. And one of the only ways to do that is to alarm us. Kids are already alarmed, you know what I mean? So I think the more that we adults are reached on this thing, probably the better.
That's really a fine line there, though, because you don't want to tip too far on the unstable side, but at the same time, you want to be aware and alarmed, like you said, and you want to have some type of action behind that emotion.
Exactly. And thoughtful action, right? Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of us watched the video on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, but if you went to the actual Sandy Hook Promise site, which is where it lived originally, it did come with action items, it did come with a petition, it did come with warning signs you should talk to your kids about looking for. So it was partly to shock us into some action, but it also did come attached with here's what you can do if you now feel shocked into action.
Yeah, and that's kind of what the end of the PSA said. It said that these things are preventable, which kind of, I mean, I think we've talked about how there are warning signs. We alerted ourselves to some of those things, but the fact that they're preventable kind of gives us all a message to take home with. And as principal, I was wondering, have you ever encountered a situation where someone has raised a red flag? What do you guys do in those sort of situations if someone does say to you, hey, I think something might be going on?
I mean, every school and every district has reporting procedures. So if we get any information that's alarming, that we think something is going on, like you instantly follow those. Like at Gary Comer, I'm at a new school than where I was at last year, but we immediately remove that student. Like we're going to have a conversation. You start addressing them as a person, but you're also contacting all of the appropriate people so that in the event that there is something going on, everybody knows. But every school has a procedure that they follow for that.
Heidi, what would you say to the critics of this video, the people who think that this is too much, it's insensitive to the victims, the people who just don't support it?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because my initial response was a little bit more on the critical side. I felt a little bit like the children were being forced into acting out trauma, which always bothers me a little bit. But the second time I watched it and thought about it more, I thought they're already imagining this trauma in their heads. This spot just sort of gave them a voice. And I think for kids who want to move, who want to push adults to move, but aren't necessarily ready to be, you know, the Parkland kids and march or, you know, petition Congress, this is another way for them to have a voice. At least to say, like, imagine for a second this being your reality. This is our reality. Yeah. So I think it really gave them a voice. I had to really second guess my own short-sightedness on that, because my first response was like, ugh, manipulative. And then my second one was like, okay, actually reality for these kids. And so we can sit with their reality for 1 minute.
Well, I will say too, like it felt like a little bit much too, but I even had an instance last year where my son came home off the bus and said a little boy on the bus told him he was going to bring a gun to school the next day. And then my son proceeded to tell me, but his parents are police officers. So then I was, well, maybe it's okay that he knows about guns because his parents are police officers. So I contacted the school. The school told me his parents are not police officers. And thank goodness for it, you told us, because you don't never know where these things are going to go. So whether it's a bit much, you kind of almost got to be a bit much, I would think, these days.
Right. John, I imagine that these conversations are already happening between parents and kids, but is there a great way to bring these sorts of things up to continue to talk about it? I imagine they have just as many questions and we don't have very many answers for them.
One neat thing about working with kids is to talk to them about this and ask them what they think we ought to do about it. You know, kids are amazing at coming up with thoughts and solutions that are not about that moment and that day, but about like how you kind of create social emotional education and watch out for kids who are disenfranchised or on the fringes, and you know how you reach out to them. So I think engaging kids in these discussions helps a lot and might lead to solutions that we might not come up with as adults.
Amen. Guys, thank you so much for stopping on by and just really kind of scratching the surface on this subject, but it's an important one at that.